G'day battlers, and today we are diving back into the Go Battle League because it is a day to celebrate. We are getting back to the Great League and we're going to be taking a look at the Halloween Cup Great League Edition. No more Little Edition, no more Shuckle, I'd say no more Clodsire and Marill, but to be honest, they're just being replaced by Clodsire and Azumarill. So they're still going to be around, but it is a much better meta and should be a lot more fun, in my opinion. But let's dive into it. So Halloween Cup Great League Edition is going to be running from October 22nd to October 29th alongside Great League Remix, so it is a very 1500 CP sort of week, and it is very similar to the Little Cup edition of the Halloween Cup in that it is 5 typings of Poison, Bug, Ghost, Dark, and Fairy. And other than that, I think we should just dive straight into it. But just a quick reminder to subscribe if these videos are sort of use to you, if you would like to see them more in your YouTube algorithm and such for future cups coming to the Go Battle League. But with that said, let's dive into the meta, and of course we have to get our thumbnail screenshot. So boom! We have 5 main groups on the graphic, and we also have some core breakers down below me. One of them is actually one of my favorite Pokemon in the entire cup. I think it's really powerful, but we will talk about that more towards the end of the video. Now let's focus on the main 5 groups. So starting off at the very top, we have the Poisons with Clodsire, Toxapex, and Qwilfish. And I think it's good to start with those guys because Clodsire is sort of the top of the meta. It is number 1 and number 2 on PvPoke with the 2 different movesets, one with Sludge Bomb, one with Stone Edge, both with Earthquake. And there's definitely a reason that you'd want to run both movesets, but I'll talk about that in a sec. Let's just go around the sort of pentagram, talk about the other groups. We also have Froslass sort of representing the ice types. Drifblim sort of fits into this group as well as a ghost with that icy wind damage. If we sort of keep following along, we have the fairy types in the bottom right hand corner. So the Azumarill, the Wigglytuff, the Alolan Ninetales, and the Galarian Weezing. And then over on the other corner, we have the dark types with Guzzlord and Mandibuzz. And then over on the very other side of the graphic, we have the Malamar and the Golurk. Technically, I think Shadow Golurk is better on the PvPoke rankings, and it actually probably is better because you are relying on big Mud Slap damage, but on this graphic, we just have the regular one, and I think you can still run the regular one if it's a Pokemon you want to run and you don't have the Shadow available to you. Like I said before, we'll start off talking about the Poison types at the very top. So what do they actually do? And number 1, they really hard beat the Fairies. Now, if you take a sort of a bit of a squeeze at the Fairy group down in the bottom, they have 3 arrows sort of going away from them and only that 1 arrow coming towards them on the main graphic, meaning that the fairy types are very, very powerful in this meta, and I definitely think that is going to be the case. And so having an ability to counter these fairies is going to be very important, and all 3 of them do it quite well. Clodsire having Sludge Bomb definitely helps shore up a lot of these matchups, especially against the Azumarill. It makes that matchup much, much better for Clodsire. In saying that, even with Stone Edge, it's not the worst matchup in the world. You're still doing pretty well. You're still a poison type up against a fairy, so you've still got something going for you. You also generally are going to be beating the dark types. Now, Guzzlord is a pretty good matchup for you. Admittedly, Mandibuzz can be a little bit back and forth, so it actually has pretty good matchups into Qwilfish, even though Qwilfish has access to Ice Beam. And then Clodsire, this is where having Sludge Bomb actually hurts you, and you really would like to have that Stone Edge for that super effective damage into the Mandibuzz. And so this is sort of going to be up to you depending on what your team composition looks like, whether you want to run that Sludge Bomb or whether you want to run that Stone Edge, depending on what you're weak to. If you're running 2 other Pokemon that are weak to Mandibuzz or weak to Froslass, could be worthwhile in running Stone Edge on your particular Clodsire. And Toxapex is sort of similar, I guess, in a sense to Clodsire, but it's very bulky. It has the poison typing, but it can be a little bit slow. It's going to be sort of pick your poison a little bit in I didn't even mean for that, I'll be honest. That was an accident, but I'll take it. I actually didn't even talk about the group on the left-hand side. So Golurk is very strong with heavy Mud Slap damage. It does so much damage to the poisons, and that is actually why the Shadow is sort of higher on the PvPoke rankings than the regular, because Shadow Mud Slap just hits harder than regular Mud Slap. You also have Malamar, who is doing super effective Psywave damage, and there are some bulk points, breakpoint shenanigans going on, especially with Toxapex. I do have sort of an over hour-long video breaking down a lot of the Great League matchups that is going to diving into the Toxapex and the Malamar and some other Pokemon as well. So if you do want to check that video out, it's going to be up there if you want to check it out. It'll also be linked at the end of the video if you're keen. But yeah, very, very in-depth. Let's just keep it surface level for here. So that's generally what the poison types do. And so let's now sort of circle around to the Froslass. So Froslass, in addition to having pretty good matchups into the poison types, generally protects the Clodsire and Co from its counters in a sense. So it's able to beat down the Golurk and the Malamar. Again, having access to Avalanche is so hard hitting, Shadow Ball is so hard hitting, and it's relatively spammy as well. So very, very powerful Pokemon. At the same time, you're also able to actually beat the dark types, which I was a little bit bamboozled by. I was like, oh, I guess so, because like it's a flying type and a dragon type. So ice is obviously super effective, but it's still a little boggling in my mind. I was like, oh, well, there you go. It makes sense. But then you are going to be losing to the fairies pretty hard, especially, you know, the charm damage coming in from Wigglytuff, but even just Azumarill is really good at soaking up all of Frostlass's energy and dishing back just enough with just throwing Play Rough. So definitely something to watch out for, and another reason why the fairies are going to be quite important. Frostlass isn't actually that high on the PvPoke rankings. I just think it's actually very strong, which is why I've put it on the main graphic here. Moving on to the fairies in the bottom right hand corner, as we said, they're going to lose to the poisons, beat the Frostlass, and then actually have really good matchups into the dark types, as you would expect. That includes Malamar, because Malamar also has the dark typing and doesn't actually have any moves to hit super effective the fairies. It's got Foul Play and Superpower, unless you want to be totally wacko and run Hyper Beam, but I wouldn't recommend it in this particular meta per se. Well, I guess you could actually ditch Superpower. Maybe it is actually, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it is worth running Foul Play Hyper Beam. That could be a pretty interesting moveset. Something to think about, especially in this blind 3 format, which the Halloween Cup is. But then the fairies also have a pretty good matchup into Golurk, because they are just able to soak up that damage, dish quite a bit back. A lot of super effective damage actually going around as well between some of these fairy types. And I should mention that Galarian Weezing, even though it is Poison Fairy, it very much acts in that fairy role. I mean, it's using Fairy Wind, Play Rough, and then Brutal Swing as sort of its other coverage move, would be my recommendation. And, you know, it doesn't really do anything that a poison type does, which is why it is hanging out with the fairies and not hanging out with the poison types. But let's move along to the dark types in the bottom left. Again, lose to the fairies, lose to the ice types, lose to the poisons. What do? They beat the Golurk and the Malamar, and I think that this graphic doesn't do them justice, because they also generally beat any other Pokemon that is not on this graphic. So they sort of beat like a whole bunch of other things because they have such good neutral damage. Mandibuzz with its bulk, Guzzlord with its Dragon Tail damage. I mean, pretty much everything in the Core Breaker box, those two are going to be beating, and so much more. And they do have some win cons against a lot of the things with arrows towards them as well. Like, I mean, a Guzzlord with energy is able to beat a Frostlass if it's coming in dry. So there's all sorts of things to consider, and I think the graphic doesn't do them justice. Now, let's move to that last group on the graphic, the Malamar and the Golurk, who are generally losing to those dark types, but these guys are here just because they beat the poison group. That is essentially why they're here. They lose otherwise, but they also have pretty good matchups against the rest of the meta. Golurk is a little more, I don't want to call it RPS, but it is very sort of a high damage. It's one of those Pokemon that has some very hard losses, but some very hard wins, including things like, you know, Drapion, for example, very hard win for Golurk. And then Malamar is I think it's quite a skilled Pokemon. Maybe less so if you decide to not run Superpower, but the Foul Play Hyper Beam moveset, you'll be thinking about trying to land that Hyper Beam at the opportune moment, and also just doing a lot of Psywave damage to pretty much everything in the meta that doesn't have the dark typing. So that's generally the main graphic. Let's talk about the core breakers a little bit, because I think there's some really good picks in here. So for one, there's Drapion. Drapion and Greninja are both sort of like dark types that have very neutral play into most of the meta. Greninja is also a Pokemon that can counter Clodsire, but sort of depends on the moveset. In the sort of PvPoke default sims, Greninja is able to beat the Stone Edge version, but loses to the Sludge Bomb version. But it is all, you know, flip of a coin. Like, it's very dime based in the sense that it's very tight. It's very thin, the margins. So you can very easily get a little bit of Water Shuriken energy a bit earlier and just Hydro Cannon away, take out Clodsire, but generally has good matchups across the rest as well. I should mention Drapion doesn't have great PvPoke sims, I don't think, in the sort of like head-to-head default sims, but I think that under the watch of a good player, under a great driver, I think that it can actually do a lot of really good damage, just like it does in the Open Great League. We also have Alolan Marowak, who is kind of just here for people that are into that. Like, you know, Bone Club is obviously good because it has ground damage. You've got access to some big, heavy ghost damage as well, but I just don't think it's the best in the format. Ariados is the one that I actually really like. So Ariados has the poison typing, and so not only is it able to beat the fairy types, but it's also able to beat the things that beat the poison types. So it's able to beat the Malamar and the Golurk, and it's able to beat the dark types as well, especially that Guzzlord. Mandibuzz, not as great, but you're still able to do quite a bit of damage to it. And so Ariados to me is sort of the ultimate core breaker in this particular meta. Plus, it's really spammy. It only takes 5 Poison Stings to get to Trailblaze and Lunge. Lunge reduces your opponent's attack, Trailblaze boosts your own. So I think that Ariados is going to be a really, really strong pick in this meta. And I really think that's one that you're going to have to think about when you are going into the meta, even if you want to play it. Like, think about running it as well, because I do think it's going to be pretty good. Carbink is very highly ranked on the PvPoke rankings, but like I don't know how good it's actually going to be. There is a lot of ground running around that could really ruin its day, but it's there if you want to go for that sort of hard alignment battles. I guess, look, again, it's not super RPS because we are in a 50-second switch timer zone. There are so many neutral Pokemon running around as well, but most of the neutral Pokemon probably beat Carbink, so I wouldn't recommend Carbink, but it is there if you do want to sort of run into that. And then Galarian Moltres is another Pokemon that I think is quite interesting. It's not super high on the PvPoke rankings, but I think it has really good neutral play again into so much of the meta. Even the things that it loses against, I feel like it does have play into. So just watch out for Brave Birds because they can seriously sting. And if you really do want to play it and you don't have one yet, I guess keep trying the Daily Adventure Incense, but we can just keep trying, right? But in a nutshell, that is my Halloween Cup Great League Edition sort of meta simplified infographic. Let me know if there's anything I missed, anything you sort of want to add, anything I've got wrong. Always appreciate hearing that in the comments down below because it helps us all. So also give it a read. If you're coming and watching this later on, see if anyone's dropped some insights about this meta, and we'll be getting to it in a little bit over a day from when I'm recording this. So look, it's not a Shuckle Cup, so it should be pretty good. But yeah, let me know what you're going to be running. And with that, I want to give a massive thank you to my patrons and YouTube members as well for being lovely human beings. And with that said, don't forget to like, comment, and especially subscribe if this is content you're interested in. And with that, I will see you in the next one.